My name is Chloe Bennett, and 3 weeks before I was supposed to move into my dorm, I discovered my parents hadn't just broken my heart, they had liquidated my entire future. My grandmother Evelyn spent 18 years meticulously saving $187,000 for me. Every birthday check, every cent of her pension, gone. My father, Robert, drained the account to buy my older brother, Austin, a house he didn't earn. When I confronted my mother, Victoria, she didn't even flinch. She looked me in the eye and said, "Because he's the one who actually matters in this family." She thought I'd stay quiet to keep the peace. She was wrong. Before we dive into how Grandma Evelyn made sure the whole town knew the truth, please take a moment to subscribe and hit the bell. It truly helps the channel. And I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city and time in the comments. I read every single one. Now, let's go back to the Tuesday that changed everything. I grew up in a town called Ridgemont. It's the kind of place you see on postcards. White picket fences, neighbors who know your coffee order, and a sense of security so thick you'd think nothing bad could ever happen here. Our house on Oak Street looked perfect from the outside, but inside there was a silent, rigid ranking system. My brother Austin was the son everyone orbited around. I was just the background noise. Austin was 26, charming, and perpetually finding himself on someone else's dime. He dropped out of college twice, quit 4 jobs in 3 years, and moved back home to a redecorated room while my mother, Victoria, blamed the unfair world for his lack of success. Meanwhile, I was the daughter who worked double shifts at the local coffee shop, maintained a 4.0 GPA, and bought my own textbooks. Every time I brought home a trophy or an acceptance letter, my mom would barely look up from her phone and mutter, "That's nice, Chloe." I didn't mind being the self-sufficient one because I knew I had a ticket out. My grandma Evelyn had told me since I was 10 years old, "Chloe, I'm putting money away for you. This is your freedom." I trusted that promise like I trusted the sunrise. The nightmare began on a Tuesday in July. I was sitting at the kitchen island, my laptop open to the university's enrollment portal. I had my housing deposit ready from my own savings, but it was time to wire the first semester's tuition. I called the bank, a pen in my hand, ready to cross the final item off my list. "I'd like to authorize a wire transfer from the custodial savings account ending in 777, I said, my voice bright with excitement. The woman on the other end, her voice professional and thin, asked for my verification. I gave it. Then came the silence. It wasn't a brief pause. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating silence that makes your stomach drop before you even know why. "Miss Bennett," she finally said, her tone shifting to something closer to pity. "I'm looking at a current balance of $214.36. I actually laughed. "No, there's a mistake. It should be approximately $187,000. Can you check the investment side of the account?" "The account was liquidated through a series of withdrawals starting last November," she replied, the sound of keyboard clicks echoing like a death knell. "The amounts ranged from $10,000 to $20,000. All transactions were authorized by the custodian, Robert Bennett." The room tilted. I looked out the window and saw Austin's brand new charcoal gray truck sitting in the driveway, the one my mom told me he got through a special financing deal. The air felt too thick to breathe. My father, the man who sat quietly at dinner every night avoiding my eyes, had signed away my entire life, one withdrawal at a time, for 8 months. I hung up the phone. My hands weren't shaking. They were ice cold. I walked into the living room where my mother was lounging on the sofa, scrolling through a home decor app. She looked so peaceful, so untouched by the fact that she had just erased my future. "Mom," I said, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. "Where is my college fund?" She didn't jump. She didn't even look guilty. She slowly set her phone down, looked at me with a terrifyingly calm expression, and said, "We used it for your brother's house, Chloe. He needed a foundation. He needed something real to call his own. That was my money," I whispered. "Grandma saved that for me." Victoria stood up, smoothing her shirt. "It was a custodial account, which means legally, it was ours to manage for the family's best interest. Austin is struggling. You're the smart one. You'll figure it out. You always do." And then she said it, the line that ended my childhood, "Because he's the one who actually matters in this family." I stood in that silent living room for what felt like an eternity, the echoes of my mother's words, "He's the one who actually matters," ringing in my ears like a physical blow. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and drove straight to the one place that still felt like home, Grandma Evelyn's cottage on Maple Street. Evelyn wasn't just my grandmother. She was a retired high school English teacher who viewed the world through a lens of strict grammar and even stricter morals. When I walked into her kitchen, smelling of lavender and old books, I broke. I told her everything, the $214 balance, my father Robert's signatures, and my mother Victoria's cold, calculated justification. I expected her to cry. I expected her to gasp. Instead, Grandma Evelyn set her tea down with a deliberate click and looked at me with eyes that had turned into cold blue steel. "Chloe," she said, her voice dropping into a register I'd never heard before. "Go to the guest room. Under the bed, there is a fireproof safe. Bring it here." I did as I was told. When I set the heavy black box on the kitchen table, she opened it with a key she kept on a chain around her neck. Inside weren't just heirlooms. They were 3 thick navy blue folders, organized with the precision of a federal audit. "I love my daughter Victoria," Grandma Evelyn whispered, "but I have never, not for 1 second, trusted her with a dime. I knew the moment I opened that account for you 18 years ago that one day she would see your future as her own personal piggy bank." She slid the first folder toward me. It contained the original UTMA, Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, documents from the day I was born. My name was the beneficiary. Robert was the custodian. But there, in bold ink, was the legal clause. Funds must be used solely for the benefit of the minor. The second folder was even more devastating. It contained every single annual statement from the last 18 years, categorized by date. The third, a collection of every letter, every card, and every memo she had ever sent to my parents, explicitly stating that this money was a gift for Chloe Bennett's education only. "She thinks she can rewrite the narrative," Evelyn said, standing up and reaching for her phone. "She thinks she can go to church on Sunday, post a prayer emoji on Facebook, and make the town believe this is just a family misunderstanding. She relies on our silence to survive. That ends today." "What are we doing, Grandma?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "We aren't just calling a lawyer, Chloe. We're calling Catherine Reed. She's the best estate attorney in the state, and she doesn't lose." And then she paused, her thumb hovering over a contact in her phone. "I'm calling Sarah Jenkins at Channel 7. She was my student back in 2003. She's a shark for a good story, and she knows I don't lie." My breath caught. "Grandma, that's public. Everyone will know. The whole town will see what they did." Evelyn leaned across the table, taking my hands in hers. Her grip was like a vice. "Good, let them see. Your mother has spent decades building an image of the perfect, selfless matriarch while she hollowed you out to fill Austin's pockets. She thinks she's playing a game of checkers. She doesn't realize I've been playing chess since the day you were born." Within 2 hours, the kitchen table was a war room. Catherine Reed arrived in a sharp navy blazer, her briefcase hitting the table with a thud of authority. She spent 45 minutes reviewing Evelyn's meticulous paper trail before pushing her glasses up her nose. "This isn't just a civil dispute," Catherine said, looking directly at me. "Because the amount exceeds $100,000 and involves a fiduciary trust. This is felony-level misappropriation of funds. If we move forward, Robert and Victoria aren't just looking at a lawsuit. They're looking at a grand jury." I looked at Grandma Evelyn. She didn't blink. She just nodded once. "File the complaint, Catherine. And Sarah, tell her we're ready for the cameras." The air in Ridgemont changed the moment the Channel 7 news van pulled onto Maple Street. In a small town, a news crew isn't just media. It's a signal that the status quo has been shattered. I sat in Grandma Evelyn's living room, watching Sarah Jenkins set up her lights. Sarah was sharp, professional, and had a no-nonsense aura that made my mother's rehearsed smiles look like cheap plastic. Grandma Evelyn sat in her armchair, her posture as straight as a ruler. When the red light on the camera blinked to life, she didn't waver. She laid out the 3 blue folders like a hand of winning cards. She told the story of 18 years of sacrifice, of a teacher's pension diverted dollar by dollar into a trust that was meant to be my wings. "I love my daughter," Evelyn said, looking directly into the lens with a chilling calm. "But I love the truth more. My granddaughter's future was stolen to fund a lifestyle my grandson didn't earn. That isn't a family decision. That is a crime." The segment aired at 6 p.m. on Thursday. I watched from the shadows of Evelyn's hallway. Seeing my family's dirty laundry aired to 12,000 households felt like being exposed in a storm. But as Sarah Jenkins narrated the legal definition of fiduciary duty and showed the $214 balance, I felt something else. Weightlessness. The secret was out. By 8 p.m., the Ridgemont Community Facebook group, the digital heartbeat of our town, was a war zone. My mother, Victoria, had spent years cultivating an image as the town's most devoted mother. She had already posted her counterattack. a soft focus photo of our family with a caption about painful misunderstandings and prayers for a confused grandmother. But the town wasn't buying it. Not this time. Mrs. Henderson, my AP English teacher, was the first to comment. I taught Chloe for 4 years. She is the hardest working student I've ever known. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a tragedy. That one comment got 200 likes in an hour. Then came the others. Neighbors who had seen Austin's new truck. Church members who remembered Victoria bragging about Austin's real estate investment. The prayer emojis on my mother's post began to disappear, replaced by hard questions she couldn't answer. The real shift, however, happened in our own backyard. Austin showed up at Evelyn's door that Friday night. He looked like a ghost. He wasn't the arrogant, favored son anymore. He was a man who had realized his gift was actually stolen property. "I didn't know, Chloe," he whispered as we stood on the porch. "Mom told me she took out a home equity loan. She showed me papers. She said it was all legitimate." "The papers were fake, Austin," I said, handing him my phone with the attorney's summary. "There was no loan. There was only my bank account. You're living in a house built on my education." He stared at the screen, and for the first time in my life, I saw my brother grow up. The color drained from his face as he realized our mother hadn't just robbed me. She had turned him into an unwitting accomplice. "I'm selling it," he said, his voice cracking. "I'm listing the house tomorrow. I won't be the reason you don't go to college." While Austin was finding his conscience, Victoria was losing her grip. On Saturday, she was asked to step down from the church auxiliary board. On Monday, her employer at the local florist told her not to come in. The publicity was too much for a small business. The social capital she had spent decades building had evaporated in 48 hours. Then, the final hammer dropped. Catherine Reed called. "The district attorney has seen the news segment and reviewed the bank records we submitted," she told us. "Because of the forged documents Victoria used to trick Austin, they are adding identity theft and fraud to the misappropriation charges. This is no longer just about the money, Chloe. This is a criminal investigation." The walls were closing in, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one trapped inside them. Justice in a small town doesn't arrive like a lightning bolt. It's more like a slow, freezing winter that changes the landscape forever. As the legal gears began to grind, the house on Oak Street, the one I used to call home, became a tomb of silence. My father, Robert, took a plea deal almost immediately. He stood in that wood-paneled courtroom, looking small and broken in a suit that hung off his frame, and admitted to his role in the theft. He received 3 years of probation and a court order to pay back half the restitution. He didn't look at me once. My mother, Victoria, was a different story. She fought until the very last second. She cycled through 3 different attorneys, clinging to the delusion that as a parent, she had a divine right to my grandmother's money. But when the prosecution presented the fabricated loan documents she had used to trick Austin, her defense collapsed. She was convicted of felony-level misappropriation. No prison time. The judge cited her lack of prior record. "Nhong ko ai nan banan 5 num quan chi. 200 gyo fuk vu kong jong va mot vet ho jai, hin vien vien trong ho so." But while the courts were tallying up the crimes, the community was tallying up the support. Mrs. Henderson, my AP English teacher, didn't just stop at a Facebook comment. She started a GoFundMe that went viral across the state. People who had never met me, who had been the overlooked child themselves, donated $5, $10, $100. By the time it closed, it had raised over $67,000. Then came the call that changed the trajectory of my life. The university admissions office reached out directly. They had followed the Channel 7 news story. "Chloe," the dean told me, "we've reviewed your academic record and your current situation. We are offering you a full tuition merit scholarship. We want you here." I remember sitting on Grandma Evelyn's porch when I hung up the phone. For the first time in months, I could actually feel the air in my lungs. I walked inside to tell Evelyn, this woman, who had stood like a stone wall through police interviews and court dates without shedding a single tear, finally sat down at her kitchen table and sobbed. "I knew you were worth it," she whispered. "I always knew." True to his word, Austin sold the house. Every penny of the $178,000 in proceeds went into a court-monitored restitution fund. He moved into a tiny studio apartment and started working 2 jobs. Our relationship is a work in progress. It's quiet, it's careful, but it's honest. 2 months ago, I moved into my dorm. It's a small room with a view of the quad, and on the wall above my desk, there's a single photo, Grandma Evelyn and me on graduation day. I don't talk to my parents. Victoria sent me a letter on cream-colored stationery last month, claiming she did it for the family. I searched that entire letter for the word sorry. It wasn't there. I put the letter in a drawer and I haven't opened it since. People ask me if I hate them. I don't. Hate takes energy and I'm busy building a life. What I feel is a profound sense of peace. I spent 18 years believing that my silence was the price of admission to my family. I was wrong. Silence wasn't strength. It was a green light for them to walk all over me. Setting a boundary wasn't an act of war. It was an act of self-love. I lost the parents I thought I had, but I gained the woman I was meant to be. My future is finally in my own hands. And for the first time, the door to my life only opens from the inside. If you're listening to this and you're the one keeping the peace at the cost of your own soul, stop. You are worth standing up for, even if the person you have to stand up to shares your last name. My future is finally in my own hands, and for the first time, the door to my life only opens from the inside. This journey taught me a vital lesson. Setting a boundary is not an act of betrayal, it is an act of self-preservation. You are worth standing up for, even when the person you're facing shares your last name. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to join our community. I want to hear from you. Would you have forgiven them or held the line? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for staying until the end. I'm Chloe, and I'll see you in the next story.